Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision.
No worries.
Hey guys, I'm really excited for today. I have a really cool guest. So we have Jennifer Chow, and Jennifer is a lifelong foodie and mother of two boys whose passion for children's nutrition led her to co-founder Nurture Life. She leads product development, marketing, customer experience, and strategy focused on making healthy eating decisions easier for families. Prior to Nurture Life, Jennifer spent 17 years in marketing and product development in the tech industry, most recently as vice president of marketing at Engine Yard, and previously leading for SAP's outsourcing business in the Americas. She holds a bachelor's in economics and an MBA from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Awesome. So welcome, Jennifer. And just so everyone knows what we're talking about, if you could tell them a little bit about your company, Nurture Life.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So we created Nurture Life to make it easier for families to feed their kids healthy, fresh, nutritionally balanced food without having to create it all themselves. As we all know, families today, especially parents, are very, very busy. Kids have a lot of different activities. Parents are moving in so many different directions. So creating food from scratch, all the planning, the grocery shopping, the prepping, the cooking can be very, very time consuming. But families still want to feed their kids really healthy, nutritious, delicious food. And so we created Nurture Life to essentially give parents a solution where they wouldn't have to compromise on the healthfulness, the cleanliness of the ingredients, the freshness of the product, but they wouldn't also have to do it all themselves. So we're fully prepared meals for babies, toddlers, and kids.
Awesome. That's really exciting. And also, yes, I like to eat clean myself, and just doing it, I don't even have kids, and it's like so time consuming. So I think about it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so hard when I have kids. So these are amazing solutions for parents, I imagine.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like so many parents today, they tell us, like, even though they have kids and they're cooking for their kids, making a meal for like a toddler, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old is literally the same thing as making a mini adult meal. It takes the same amount of time, the same amount of prepping, shopping, all kinds of different ingredients, cleaning up, things like that. So whatever we can do to make it more convenient for families to feed their kids healthier, better solutions is really what we strive to accomplish.
That's awesome. And tell me a little bit about how the company started, because I know that this was more of one of those situations where you guys actually bootstrapped it and have built it up quite significantly.
Yes, no, absolutely. So the whole origin of the company is very organic. So my co-founder and I were also partners. We have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. And when our 14-year-old first started eating solid foods, we found that there were like a lot of really great puree options available. So when a baby is, starting to feed beyond breast milk and formula, 4 months, 6 months of age, you can go to the grocery store and find really, really great, clean, healthy options. But we found that like once he graduated from purees and he started wanting to like self-feed, and then certainly when he was a toddler and starting to eat toddler meals and then little kid meals, that the healthy options pretty much like fell off a cliff. You can go from like, spinach and apple puree to literally like, shelf stable, kind of puff like products that are, heavily processed to like shelf stable meals or meals on the, what was I going to say, in the freezer aisle that in many cases were like very, heavy in, carbs, saturated fat, sugar, sodium, or just all protein and not a lot of balance, which our kids really need today. Babies, toddlers, and kids, they need the macro and the micronutrient balance. They need a healthy, balance of proteins, vegetables, grains. And so we just thought, could we create a solution that would enable parents to feed their kids much healthier, much more nutritionally balanced meals without having to do it all themselves. And so that's essentially why we started the business. We start right after a baby graduates from purees and starts to essentially self-feed and then get into whole meals. And we decided that we wanted to start direct to consumer because like healthy kids food, unfortunately, is not really prevalent on the grocery store shelves today. It wasn't prevalent in direct to consumer at all. In fact, it didn't exist when we started, and we thought, okay, we will need to do a good amount of product development, research and development work to try to figure out like what really works for families. If we start direct to consumer, then we can essentially like do a lot of surveying, get real-time customer feedback on what's working, what's not working. So we did bootstrap the business. We started direct to consumer. We started by hiring a vice president of culinary operations, a registered dietitian. We worked really closely with them to develop the initial menus and product platform. We rented a restaurant space that was a former Mexican restaurant called Zocalo in Chicago, and we converted the dining area into the office space. We used the kitchen as our test kitchen, where we essentially developed all of our products and shipped them out to customers.
That's awesome. And even that space that you use, because I know it was a smaller space to start, like how many people would you say that you started with when you began this operation?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first year, while we were developing like the menu, like the products, the menus, our e-commerce subscription site, we started with four. And we ran with four people pretty much like for the first like 8 to 9 months. And then when we knew that we were transitioning to the facility that I just mentioned, or the converted Mexican restaurant, then we started ramping up the team a little bit more. We hired 2 additional people to help us with the production and essentially packing out the orders. So for quite a while, we were running with 6 people. And then as the business started to grow, we added on more people.
Awesome. And when you added on more people, because I know you started in a smaller space, like how long were you able to stay in that space before you had to transition into a larger manufacturing facility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the space that it's actually the space that I'm in right now, but it's
Oh,
only
awesome.
the office space. We moved our production facility to an external location. But in terms of the space that I'm in now, it's actually pretty decently sized. It's 7,000 square feet. So half of it, a little bit less than half of it is the office space. And then the rest of it was our former production facility. But we were essentially able to grow, I don't remember the exact number, but probably somewhere around like 30 to 40 people in this space before we transitioned out. And we were at around 15, $20 million in revenue. And so we were able to get a lot of production, a lot of output from this facility, but we were definitely sort of busting at the seams by the time we moved.
Awesome. And I know that when you moved fairly quickly. It was like
Yes.
a pretty quick transition. Tell me a little bit about that transition as you moved from the space you're in now to the larger space.
Absolutely. So because of the fact that we are a weekly subscription service and we make all of our meals to order, like we pretty much utilize like every single day of the week. We run production, actually not every single day of the week. We're off on Sundays, but we run production essentially 6 days a week. And we knew that in order to continue to get our customers' orders out without having a lag or delays or rescheduling the days that our customers receive their orders, that we would need to do like a hard cutover from this location to our Bedford Park production facility, which was much, much larger than our current production facility. So it started with us essentially securing the facility, building out the space, and then creating a pretty meticulous work back schedule and project plan for making sure that we could do a really, really swift transition. So making sure that our new facility was completely built out, that we were sure that our staff was fully versed in transitioning over to the new facility, which was great. The new facility is around 15 miles from our current facility. And so we wanted to make sure that the vast majority, if not all, and the vast majority of our staff were able to transition with us despite a very different commute. And then also making sure that the new facility had all of the equipment, all of the certifications, and then certainly like all of the ingredients ready to go as soon as we did the cutover. And so we did months of essentially project planning, getting the new facility ready, and then literally we cut over everything in a weekend where we shut down our current facility and we brought up the new facility that very next week. But we use certainly the weekend to transition everything over and make sure everything could be operational on that following Monday.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's a lot of project planning to make sure that that
For
happens
sure,
like in
for
a couple
sure.
days. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious too, because now, like with the older facility, I know you've increased, it's like 10 times as large. So what would you say, like with employees? Like I know you brought some employees over. Did you scale up employees very quickly as you moved to that new facility? Did you kind of do it over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, with our previous facility, we kept essentially our business team in our previous facility because it has a much larger office space than our production facility. And then in terms of our new production facility, we actually scaled it over time. So as the business grew, we would grow employees. So we essentially transitioned our existing employees over to the new facility. We hired a handful more to fill in the gaps that we had. And then we essentially ramped over the last few years as we ramped our sales volume.
Awesome. And how many employees do you guys have now?
Right now, we have right around like 120 team members.
Well, that's awesome. That's really cool.
Sure.
And your warehouse or your facility, I believe it's like 30,000 square feet, right?
Yes, you
Yeah,
have a
so it's
great
pretty
point. So
substantial.
it's
Yeah.
30,000 square foot facility. It's located in Bedford Park, Illinois. So it is not a very long drive at all from our business office.
Yeah, that's very cool. It was very substantial. And I'm curious as well, like even that dynamic of shifting from managing something small to managing like this larger facility, what would you say were kind of the biggest challenges that came up that you had to overcome as you switched from the smaller to the larger production?
Absolutely. So I would say the first thing is just making sure that during the design phase that the flow was really, really optimized for our production and fulfillment processes because we had a lot more space. We wanted to make sure that for team members that everything was efficient as possible. And so the facility, we were very fortunate in the sense that our landlord like brought us in very early when it was pretty much like a cold storage sort of white box-ish type space. And so we were able to work very closely with them to make sure that the facility was laid out in a way that like dry storage, cold storage, prep, cook, RTE, which is ready to eat, where all of the product is essentially consolidated, plated, and sealed, and then fulfillment, and then our dock, where orders got shipped out, all were done in a very contiguous flow to make it really, really optimized for our processes. We had the right amount of space per different department so that that was also very efficient. And then we were able to, in advance of cutting it over to the new facility, make sure that like all of the equipment was in place. All of the storage and inventory was very logically laid out so that everything would be very, very optimized. And so from transitioning from a very small facility to a much larger facility, everything was still very logical, even though it was much, much more spread out for the team. And it's crazy. Like we went, like you mentioned, from a very small space to a much, much larger space. And it's crazy how quickly, at first we were like, oh my gosh, we have so much space. This is so amazing. But with the growth of the business and the growth of the team members, like we were able to essentially fill it up very, very quickly.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool. I'm curious too, because are you guys still just doing direct to consumer, or do you also do business to business as well?
Yeah, so we do direct to consumer. We don't currently do business to business, but we did just launch in retail. So we started to pilot our kids' meals and our finger foods in retail at the end of last year in December. And we're starting to really ramp it up now. And we're actually going nationwide with a very large retailer in July, which we're very excited about.
That is
So,
exciting.
yeah. So in addition to direct to consumer, you can also find Nurturelife in select retailers, but you'll be able to find Nurturelife kids meals and nationwide starting in July.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum. That's really exciting. I'm curious as well, like as you kind of transition to these nationwide retailers, what would you say the difference is in the operations, if any at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in going to retail, we did decide to bring our strongest selling products into retail. So our strongest selling products are definitely our kids' meals and our finger foods. We do have a variety in direct to consumer, but additional products like beverages and snacks, which are very, very popular in direct to consumer. But it really is the kids' meals and the finger foods that are the most in demand. And right now, with our kids' meals and finger foods, like I mentioned, we are a weekly subscription service. So we make all of our kids' meals and our finger foods in our facility made to order. So everything is fresh, everything is perishable. We don't add any additional preservatives. Everything is MAP sealed. So modified atmosphere packaging, which essentially like flushes the oxygen and inserts inert gases to preserve shelf life without preservatives. And so with direct to consumer, all of our meals are fresh and perishable. With our retail product, because with fresh and perishable, the shelf life is by nature very short intentionally. In retail, we want to have essentially a much longer shelf life. So what we've done with our retail product is it is a frozen product. So it is all still made in our facility, but after it is sealed, it is essentially frozen. And so it has a much longer shelf life. And so really we added the freezing step on to our production process for our kids' meals and finger foods in order to be able to bring them to retail.
Okay, that's interesting. But and when you do direct to consumer, I'm imagining you still able to do the fresh dynamic.
Right. So for
Mhm.
direct to consumer, we're continuing to keep the kids' meals and the finger foods fresh. We do have customers that purchase the meals and then they freeze them if they're not using them, every day. But the vast majority of our customers do use them, like put them in the refrigerator and then just pull them out, heat them for a minute or two, and then serve them. And so they do use them fresh. But yes, for retail, the product is frozen.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I'm curious as well, because like making this leap too, was that something that you guys did self-funding, or did you also look and create investments and have investment opportunities within the company to be able to transition that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while we did do the initial investment in the business and we bootstrapped it pretty much like for the first year and a half to 2 years, since then, so pretty early on, we did start to take external funding. So we do have a variety of investors that are invested in Nurturelife. But in terms of making the transition to retail, we use the existing investments to essentially make that transition. So we didn't, say, for instance, take on any additional funding specifically for the expansion into the retail channel.
Okay, so I'm curious as well, like, what made you decide to take on outside investors, and are you particular with who you take on too?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of taking on outside investors, we decided to take on outside investors really to help us grow the business. My co-founder and I only had the means to fund the business to a certain extent, but then really needed to take on outside investors to invest more in the growth of the business, to invest more in like the capital expenditures of the business because of the fact that we have our own production facility. So really, it was to continue to fund and grow the business. In terms of like who we decide to take on as investors, we definitely are picky. We're very focused on taking on investors who are aligned with the mission and the values of the business and want to see the business grow and expand in the way that we do. So the vast majority of our investors, they believe very, 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 very strongly in our mission. And our mission is really to deliver a healthier world through better nutrition for kids. So we tend to have investors that believe very strongly in better for you products, wanting to create, healthier, cleaner, more sustainable food options for babies, toddlers, and kids, and ones that really want to see, businesses like this grow and expand and really, create better solutions that are currently present in the market when it comes to children's food.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that you're a co-founder as well. You guys have split things up, right? You split things up just based on what you do versus what he does. How did you guys figure out to divide those responsibilities the way that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So with my co-founder, we've actually worked at a variety of different companies before. together. So this is actually the third
That's
company that
nice.
we've worked at together. And so we definitely kind of know each other's strengths and weaknesses. But in terms of my co-founder, his background is much more oriented around like manufacturing, operations, supply chain, and finance. Those are all areas that he's either owned directly or managed in the past. And so it made a lot of sense for him to focus more on the manufacturing, the operations, supply chain, and finance and accounting side of the business. Whereas with my background, I have a lot of experience when it comes to product development, marketing, customer experience, product strategy. Those are all areas that I'd spent my career in prior to Nurture Life. And so for us, like our skill sets naturally complement each other a lot, but there isn't a lot of overlap because in terms of like our backgrounds prior to Nurture Life, we definitely managed very different areas of the business. And so that's pretty much how we decided to divide things up.
That's cool. And when you guys have something that maybe is challenging or you don't agree on it, how do you kind of navigate the challenge of things that you maybe don't agree on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Mhm.
would say that we're definitely very, very both very open and good at talking through things. But the other thing that I would say is over the years, like we've developed a very strong management team. So in addition to myself and Steve being the co-founders, we do have three other individuals who are on our actually, sorry, can I start that again? We actually have a
Oh,
management team of six people, not five.
yeah. Let me start. Hold on a second. Awesome. And when you think about things that you guys maybe don't agree on, right? Like something that maybe you are maybe, challenged on or something like that. How do you guys make that decision to move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk it through. So we typically talk it through. We listen to each other's reasons for it, against it. But we also talk it through with our management team. So we've been very fortunate over the years to have developed a really strong management team. So in addition to myself and Steve, we have four other team members that come from different backgrounds, very, very strong, as well as tremendous amount of expertise in their respective areas. And so when we disagree on something or agree on something, it tends to be done not just with myself and Steve, but with our full management team.
Awesome. And I'm curious too, like, even when you think about just creating this factory, creating this product on your own, like, what made you guys decide to continue creating it on your own instead of maybe outsourcing to a warehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. So the vast majority of our competitors, especially in the direct-to-consumer space, they do outsource to a contract manufacturer all of the production of their product. But for us, we did feel really strongly about being able to control the quality, control the food safety of our product, but also being able to innovate a lot more rapidly. And what we found is that when we have our own manufacturing facility, have our own research and development team, like we're able to essentially innovate very, very quickly. So when we get feedback from a consumer, say for instance, we introduce like a new meal, it could be a mac and cheese meal, it could be something more cuisine diverse, like a butter chicken, and we get feedback that like, you know, the kids like they like the taste of the mac and cheese, but they don't necessarily like the visual appearance. They'd like it to be a little bit more creamier, a little bit more orange, or a like butter chicken meal. Maybe they don't like a particular component of the meal. They give us feedback. We're able to make those adjustments and changes pretty much in real time, very, very rapidly because we run our own manufacturing operation and we're not necessarily dictated to in terms of how fast or how quickly we can change things. And then the other one that I mentioned that is incredibly important to us is by having our own team that controls all aspect of the manufacturing and the food safety, we're able to really, really control the quality of our product and make sure that it is up to our standards, which are incredibly high because obviously we're feeding babies, toddlers, and kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious as well, because even that dynamic of the testing the products, right? So when you test products, is that something that you reach out to your customer base for to see if they want to test the products? Do you have like a certain group that you do it with? What does that look like?
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So we do it in a variety of different ways depending on the product, but certainly we have a product team internal to Nurture Life that is a cross-functional team that includes team members from product development, marketing, operations, procurement, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is like our initial group of taste testers. And then we have a much larger group of kids that whether it's, friends of Nurture Life, a lot of our team members, including myself, have kids. We always will try the product on a variety of kids. And then in many cases, we also do reach out to our customers and we do beta programs where we essentially send samples of our new products out to customers, have them test them, and then complete surveys. And one of the things that's interesting that we've learned over the years with kids is in many cases, we will actually have like our team members and our customers video their kids and their initial reactions, and you get much, much more authentic feedback versus, say, for instance, like if a parent is filling out a survey, but it's hard in some cases to interpret exactly what a toddler, for example, feels about a particular meal versus like getting that video and seeing that initial reaction and seeing what they like, pick at first. If it's a meal that has like a variety of different components, it's incredibly valuable to actually get that video and get that live reaction and see what's working and what's not, so we know what to change. But yes, we always do get a lot of feedback from the product team, but just as importantly, if not more importantly, also from a pretty wide panel of kids.
That's cool. I imagine that the parents, I mean, it's probably fun for like the parents to do stuff like that. But also I imagine that you guys get some videos back that probably make you giggle.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
you get, especially with kids, like kids' reactions can be like very extreme, very dramatic, which is
Yeah.
always a ton of fun. But then also it's very direct. Like you get completely unfiltered, uncensored feedback from kids. So whether they love it or they hate it, like you're going to hear it. And that's exactly what we want.
Exactly. Yeah, I imagine that they're not filtering at all, which again
Yep.
could be really fun to watch those.
For sure, for sure.
And I know you're direct to consumer as well, which means like your customer relationship is really a top priority. So tell me a little bit about like what are maybe some of the rules or the regulations like around customer relationships that kind of make that dynamic special.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, because we're direct to consumer, like you mentioned, Carly, we do have a direct relationship with all of our customers. And so for us, like we have a customer experience team that is based in the US. All but one of our team members are based out of our Chicago office. We have a customer experience director who's fantastic, who's been with the team for almost 8 years now. And so essentially, like for us, what's really important from a rules perspective is we want to have live, real team members who have been with Nurture Life, work directly for us, are very familiar with the products, the whole Nurture Life life cycle and experience, our e-commerce subscription site that can provide like real live feedback to customers as they're reaching out to us, inquiring about like, which products do you recommend for, my kid to try, or, I have a picky eater, I've struggled to get them to eat, anything other than like, butter noodles, like how do you recommend that I start them on Nurture Life? Or, I'm doing baby-led weaning, but I'm really, really nervous about my kid choking. And I've heard that Nurture Life finger foods are a great place to start. Like, what would you recommend? So for us, really, our rules are like to provide genuine, authentic feedback based off of, our experience and our knowledge of the products. The other thing that's unique to Nurture Life is we do have a registered dietitian who is also, really tremendous and especially experienced in really guiding parents on how to start, how to feed their kids, how to deal with a lot of different feeding challenges. And so our customer experience team always engages her to provide feedback as well and guidance to parents as needed.
I'm curious too, because now that you're going into retail, what would you say the difference is? Because the way that you have it set up is just it sounds like amazing for like the customers, right? When they're going directly to you. But if they buy it in retail, what would you say the difference is between being able to educate them in that way? Like, how are you trying to get that information out if you're not able to directly connect with them?
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
So for our retail customers, we hope that they'll directly connect with us.
Mhm.
So our customer experience team and our registered dietitian, they're fully trained on the products that we have brought to market for retail. We do include our URL on the back of our retail package, and then obviously our brand name is right across the front. And so what we're hoping is that for customers that find us or discover us, in their retail store, if they have any questions, if they have, feeding challenges with their kids, or just general questions about like ingredients or how to start or how to diversify their kids' palate, we're really hoping that they'll also reach out to us and to our customer experience team, and we can guide them with our customer experience team.
That's cool. That's awesome. I imagine, yeah, it's helpful. Like just even the name, like if I read it, I'm like, well, maybe this is healthier just because it says nurture. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's interesting is like with a lot of CPG companies, because they don't have direct relationships with their customers, it's really, really hard to find like, a person that's actually educated that can help guide them on the products.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, like that is something that's different for us because we've been direct to consumer for 10 years now. Like we just have a staff that is, ready and trained to help customers with anything when it comes to our products.
That's cool. Yeah, you guys have built a really solid foundation there.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And I'm curious as well, because even that dynamic, like when you first started the business, right? A lot of this is education in a sense. And what would you say were some of the ways that you saw worked really well for educating the customer versus like maybe some of the ways that maybe didn't get to the customer, like didn't work and wasn't educating them to help them to understand what your product truly was?
Yes, absolutely. So what we found is that especially when it comes to parents with young children, they tend to want a lot of knowledge. They tend to like do a lot of research, want to learn as much as we can, as much as they possibly can. And so what we've found with a lot of our customers is that we need to meet them where they're at, whether it is collateral, like inside their first order, the emails that we send to customers when they first start trying Nurture Life in terms of how to like introduce like new products, new flavors, new cuisine types, new ingredients, new textures to their kids. One of the things that we find is that whether a family comes to us at the very beginning, in which case the educational needs are a little bit different, or in many cases, like families are starting out with us, when their kid is a toddler, or maybe 4 or 6 years of age, and they've had like certain eating patterns and habits for many, many years, but they're trying to like expand their kids palate or get their kid to eat healthier, get their kid to want to try different things. Like the type of education that we give depending on the stage when somebody comes to Nurture Life is different. And that's something that we've learned over time. Like if a family is coming to Nurture Life, their baby is 6 months old or 8 months old, and they're trying finger foods for the very first time, the type of educational content that we'll give to them in the box or through emails is very different than, say, for instance, if a kid is 6 years old, they're trying Nurture Life for the first time, they're a picky eater, they really don't want to try new things. The parents are struggling because the kid is like just not eating any vegetables whatsoever. I don't know if you know some of the stats. It's crazy on children's nutrition in the country, but like, 1 in 10 children in our country will eat enough fruits and vegetables per day. So that tends to be like one of the biggest challenges for families is how do I get my kid to eat more veggies? And so we'll have a variety of educational content on how to introduce children to different veggies. And it really is, something that takes time when it comes to children's feeding. So there's an interesting statistic out there that comes from feeding experts that it takes typically 7 to 14 times to introduce a child to a new ingredient or a new meal component
Wow.
before they'll grow to like it and eventually love it. So with kids, so much of it is familiarity, and introducing the same thing over and over again and being persistent and not giving up. So providing parents with those types of educational resources or those types of insights or pieces of knowledge that can help them with their journey when it comes to feeding their kids, developing their palate, creating a healthy foundation, is all what we do with our families. But depending on the stage that their kid is at or the particular challenge that they have, we provide different types of materials. And I think that that's one of the biggest learnings that we've had over the years, is to kind of really customize the educational materials based off of the age of the child, the type of challenge that a family can have,
Mhm.
whether it's, an age-based challenge, which tend to be pretty prevalent. Like, a baby will tend to eat a lot more diverse ingredients, not resist as much, whereas a toddler will definitely want to, express their likes and dislikes. It's one of the only things that a toddler can really control is what they put in their mouths. And so you
Yeah.
tend to have a lot more pickiness, a lot more resistance at the toddler ages. And then when a kid is, past the toddler ages, a lot of times, unfortunately, like if the kid has been really picky through the toddler age ranges and the parent hasn't gotten the child to diversify what they're eating, then it becomes like, okay, like what do I do to get my kid to eat enough protein, enough of the right macronutrients, things like that. And so then that becomes different, from an educational perspective. And so like really learning over the years, like how to make sure we tailor the content to the different stage, that a parent is when it comes to feeding their child, and different stage that the child is in. And then also making sure that we make our educational materials available through a variety of different channels, so that depending on what a parent prefers, whether it's email, whether it's video, whether it's like doing their own research on our website, whether it's reading something, a collateral piece that comes, inside their first order, we tend to want to try to, deliver educational materials in all those different formats, so we can meet a parent like where they want to find information and research.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company. Yeah, that actually makes sense. I love that. Where it's not just educating them about nutrition, but it's educating them about like how to help your kid engage with the nutrition. It's funny because my sister, she has kids, they're 11 now, but when they were really young, it's like you said, they would give them all this variety and they would just eat it because they wouldn't argue. And so you look at them and you see that they eat, like they'll eat sushi, they love oysters, like they love all this stuff like that I just never had when I was a kid, right? But then as soon as they got older, like we're really struggling having them like try new foods now. And it's like, how are you guys not trying new foods? Like you're eating all this crazy stuff. But you're right. It's because once they hit that stage where they can make the decision, all of a sudden they're like, well, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, sorry, not sorry, guys. So that's really cool. I love that it's like that psychological component of how do I tackle this normal life stage with my kids to be able to expand the palate and make sure that they're getting all the nutrition they need, which I think we don't even talk about. Like,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, it's like
No,
this
that's
is
so true. And the
um,
psychological component is almost in some
yeah,
cases, parents, a larger component. I mean, it's one thing to like make sure, what you're feeding your kid is nutritionally balanced. It has the right like macros and micros, it has clean ingredients, all that type of stuff. But like if the kid doesn't eat it, then like
doesn't matter.
the parent has lost the battle. So then so much of it is helping educate parents on like how to overcome the psychological, how to work with a toddler, or a young kid, how not to get frustrated, how to understand that like, having a kid like reject new foods is all part of the process. And that's completely normal. And so much of it is just persistence and making sure that you keep reinforcing and trying that same new food over and over and over again, and keep diversifying like the ingredients and the components so that your kid is constantly exposed to more, because then they become familiar with it, then they eventually grow to like it, and then eventually love it. And one of the things that's so challenging in our country is like with the vast majority of kids food brands, like they're pandering to like ultra processed foods, like
Yeah.
high in sodium, high in fat. And so what's happened is so many of our kids are eating foods that tend to be really unhealthy, but not only that, their palate has become so
Yeah.
accustomed to crave those types of ingredients and those types of components, and they're not, designed, or their palates haven't developed to want to eat like clean, healthy food. And so one of the things that's so important with parents is knowing like, okay, I can in fact transition my kid from having like a, like a relatively unhealthy or a picky type of palate to a much like healthier, cleaner, more diverse palate. But so much of it is like not giving up and not getting frustrated, or getting frustrated, but still not giving up, because getting frustrated when it comes to feeding kids is only natural. And then continuing to try and just reinforce those healthy foods and creating like that healthy foundation for your kid, because it is so incredibly critical for
Mhm.
kids to healthily, in order to have the right foundation, and also to just, grow and develop, as good as they possibly can.
Yeah, I think
Yes, the psychological is key.
it's wild. I'm curious to actually I say this then, but it's funny because like even when you're saying this, I have a client and I've had the opportunity to work with their kid as well, but they fed him very clean, like for his whole childhood, and they were doing at home like home study for homeschooling. And the second that they brought him to school, they're like, we're not going to be able to control his diet the way we used to. But simultaneously, they're like, well, let's give him the opportunity to also kind of make his own choice. And so
Mhm.
he goes to school and he eats the junk food and he goes crazy and he gets all excited because he's eating sugar and he's getting the crazy highs. And then later on in the day, he had a conversation with his mom and he's like, Mom, I don't feel good. And he's like, why don't I feel good? He's explaining like the dynamics of what happens when you're eating these processed foods and unhealthy and all the things that are happening now with his digestion and his stomach hurts and he's crashing from the sugar. And like they kind of educated him and he's like, I don't think I want to eat junk food anymore. And so we give it to our kids thinking that they want it and they need it and it's almost like this treat. But if we also, I think that we don't realize like we're also not giving them the opportunity to make their own choice. And if we fed them healthy, would they choose to eat that way based on how they feel? And it was really cool to see this kid like make a conscious decision, like, I'm not sure that this is the right path for me. Like I feel awful.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
amazing that that kid like recognized that, and
Yeah.
that it was very, very much so tied to like what he was eating during the day. I think if more kids had that like self-realization, that would be amazing. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of kids don't. But like,
Mm.
there's a really crazy stat, like 67% of our
Yeah.
kids' calories today come from ultra processed foods, which tend obviously not to be very healthy. And they do a lot of things to kids as they're consuming them. They don't feel as good, but certainly like, early nutrition habits of kids like can lead to so many issues later in life. But even today, like 1 in 5 kids that are entering kindergarten are either overweight or obese. And I think that with a lot of kids, like they don't necessarily, because they've never really, or they just haven't eaten a lot of healthy foods. In many cases, it's like the state of being and feeling is what they know. And so they don't, in many cases, know what it feels like to feel like, better nourished, healthier, sleep better, have better focus and, attention and all that type of stuff versus like, the sugar high and then the crash and all those types of things. So it's amazing that that kid like recognized so quickly that,
Yeah.
that what he was eating like affected him so much. But if he was eating very, very clean to begin with, and then all of a
That's why
sudden,
he noticed.
oh, that's probably why. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of kids in our country, because it is hard to find healthy food for kids without, especially healthy meals, without like making them from scratch. Other than solutions like Nurture
Mhm.
Life, and a handful of new ones are emerging, like us. It is hard if a parent wants to find something that's convenient and doesn't want to make it from scratch, to find something that is really healthy, that doesn't contain a lot of sodium, a lot of sugar, a lot of fat, which is so unfortunate. And that really has to change in our country, because we're doing our kids such a disservice by not making
Mm.
sure that there were a lot more really, really healthy options for what they could be eating.
Yeah, well, I think too, it's like that psychological dynamic as well, where we do use food as a reward, right? Like if the kid does something good, it's like, okay, we'll get you ice cream, we'll get you the candy, we'll get you the cake. And we've all kind of grown up in that dynamic because it's how our society has run. And
Absolutely.
It's difficult because it's like, how do we transition out of that? What's the new form of the reward? How can I create something that is maybe like a little bit more balanced so we don't like we take the link away to like this food and like this almost psychological trap that we get ourselves caught in that we struggle with as adults, you know? And
Yeah.
then all of a
Oh,
sudden we're adults and
absolutely.
we're like, why is this happening? It's like, well, this was our reward as a kid, and now we're rewarding ourselves present day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And food is
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like
Yeah.
it's such like a pleasure all around. Like I
I
just feel
know.
one of those things where it's like we consume it multiple times a day. There's so much like diverse and wonderful food out
Yes.
like it easily can serve as a reward. But I think with kids, like the key is, when it comes to the core meals, to try to make them as healthy and as clean as possible. But giving kids dessert, giving kids a reward, when warranted from time to time is absolutely not something that shouldn't be done. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. Just the immediate association of food as reward can have a lot of, really negative implications, especially if it's used, for meals and multiple times a day. That's definitely something that can be pretty dangerous when it comes to children's diets, unless those rewards are like really healthy.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I was talking to my husband about this literally yesterday. We were out to dinner and we were enjoying a restaurant. And it was just, we get into philosophical conversations all the time. And I'm like, what? I was like, it doesn't ever occur to me because it's so normal. But food is just this staple in our life that funny enough is just there to get us to live and survive and make our body function. Like that's genuinely the only purpose food really has. But as humans, we've turned it into an event, a social dynamic, something that brings us together. And now we have all these restaurants and all these like chefs and all this food, and it is so exciting. And it's not something that I'm ever probably ever going to give up like to that degree ever because I love it, right? But simultaneously, you're like, I can also see how it's like so challenging to us because now it brings all these other things forward. And it's almost made it like this one thing that's just here to get us to survive, like, is now something that we have to fight and is a challenge and is giving us all these other problems. And I was like, I wonder what life would be like if food was just food. Like,
Yeah. But on the
like,
other
what would
hand,
it be like?
yeah, you can look at that on the flip side and
Right?
and also look at like all the different like incredibly pleasurable and exciting things and diverse things that food brings that can also be very positive, right? Like with
Right?
kids,
With the
like there's
chefs and like the
so many like
variety.
yeah, there's so many wonderful foods that are
Mhm.
also like very healthy,
Yeah.
that we can feed our kids and give to them and get them, really, really excited about. There's so many different ways that you can like prepare foods. There's so many like diverse foods and ingredients and cuisine types that you could like introduce foods or introduce to kids and like, teach them about like different cultures in the world and things like that. And, and then there are like certain types of foods that kids like to eat that you could totally like elevate, to an art form. Like sushi would be a great example of that. So I think that, you could look at it from that perspective as well, and look at it as, something where like there's so many different aspects of food that a parent can explore with kids and expose their kids to and make it really like fun and exciting in addition to just being, being essential and nourishing.
Yeah, I think that's cool too. But again, I love like the psychological dynamic that you bring into food, even in the sense of, when you were talking about doing the testing and you're like, well, the macaroni and cheese was like not orange enough, you know? And it is because it is the reality is like, this is what we have as a culture with food. This is what we made it to be that it's important. So how do we help to integrate like both of these dynamics where we can make it fun, where we can make it exciting, but we can also make it nourishing, right? That's my favorite thing. I like to be like, what do I love that's junk food and how do I make it healthy? Like, how do I create something like healthier so I just can actually eat like the things that I like and still have that experience behind it. So I really love that you guys are doing that. And I'm curious too, when did you realize that the psychological component was so important? What part of the company or what stage of the company would you say that you realized this was going to be really important to include?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say pretty early on.
Yeah.
So when we first started the business, like we were a little bit too idealistic when it came to what we thought kids would eat. So we definitely, had, you know, products or meals that were, perfect from a nutrition, or, our registered dietitians, like, guidelines of perfect from a nutrition perspective, incredibly clean from an ingredient perspective, not always super kid friendly, not always super visually appealing, probably a little bit too cuisine diverse. And what we were finding is that, like, we got feedback from parents like, this meal, like, as an adult, I think it's amazing. It's so good. I love it, but it's not appealing to my kids. And so what we started to do is we started to transition our menu to being much, much more kid friendly. And I would say, like, right now, around 70% of the meals that we have on our menu are very kid friendly. But we do them what we call, like, the nurture life way. So if we're going to do a mac and cheese, we're going to have like a full serving of vegetables or butternut squash, like, blended into the sauce. It will still be that orange color, but we'll use like annatto versus, like, a like food dye or food coloring, so that it's still very, very clean. We're going to have like whole wheat noodles, so essentially give that nutritional balance. So as parents were giving us that feedback, we were also doing a lot of research on our own, and we learned that like 70% of parents in the United States, they self-identify their kids as picky eaters. And as soon as we learned that, we got this feedback from our customers, we realized, okay, like, we need to start helping parents more on the psychological or the educational component beyond just what's in the product. But how do you introduce a new product to your child? How do you start to educate them on, like, what it is that they're eating? How do you start to, like, think about, okay, how do I, like, be persistent about what I'm trying to feed my kids? How do I, like, introduce new components, introduce new ingredients? How do I talk to my kids about it? How much do I plate to not make it overwhelming? All of those types of things. So we learned all of those very early on. We started to not only transition, like, the products that we were offering, but we also started to add that educational component, which our registered dietitian is incredibly well educated when it comes to the psychological component of feeding kids, because they're constantly working with families on the different challenges, doing a lot of research, learning from other practitioners. And so we integrated all of those types of informations very, very early on to help parents with that component, in addition to actually providing them with the products that are going to be a lot healthier. Because, like I mentioned, for us, and this happened very early on too. Like, we thought, okay, we'll just construct like the most perfect, we'll craft the most perfect meals from a nutrition and ingredients perspective. But then we learned very, very early on, if a kid doesn't like the meal, if they don't want to try it, if they're not attracted to it from a visual perspective, in addition to a taste and all the different senses that they have, like, we've completely lost the battle. So for us, it's not just about crafting a perfect meal from a nutrition and ingredient perspective. Like, it has to be delicious. It has to be scrumptious. It has to be visually appealing. A kid has to want to eat it and be excited to eat it in order for it to be a win for us. And so we definitely learned that very early on, and we have lived and died by essentially that ethos ever since then.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And thank you for sharing everything that you did today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on, and tell listeners where they could find out more about the company, more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a parent who wants to feed your kid fresh, nutritionally balanced meals that are also delicious and absolutely loved by kids, I would recommend definitely going to nurturelife.com. It's just NURTURELIFE.com. And you can learn a lot about our different products, and certainly purchase them online. And we would love to have you try our products. We have thousands of families that rely on Nurture Life every week to feed their kids. And we would love to have you try us out and join these thousands of families that are finding a tremendous amount of relief during mealtime by ordering Nurture Life and feeding their kids fresh, nutritionally balanced, delicious meals that their kids love to eat. But as the parent, you could be super proud to serve.
Awesome. And thank you again for coming, and thank you for sharing this information. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carly, for the time today. I really appreciate it. And we love telling the story of Nurture Life. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity today.